Mark, it's a pleasure to actually sit down with you and speak with you. I know it's been an incredibly busy week for you and a preamble up until COP with some amazing announcements. And I know your team's been working incredibly hard. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's my absolute honor and privilege.
No. Great to be here.
Thank you. So maybe I'll start with that, actually. Prior to COP, you made a pretty special announcement around the claims code. Do you want to start there and then maybe talk about then some of the announcements that have been made during this week?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, when you say it's been a busy week, it's been about a busy 6 months. But
busy 6 months.
But that's all right. I might be bored otherwise.
Yeah.
So we've, VCMI, my organization, the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, we have been trying to answer a question.
Yep.
When and under what circumstances can companies credibly make voluntary use of carbon credits?
Very important.
On one level, seems like a very simple question. And then you realize
how is it in practice?
Well, you're in a space, it's in a space that's riven with ideology, riven with impartial data and information, and driven by meaningful differences between sectors, companies, and geographies.
Yeah.
But let's go to what the claims code is. The claims code is a piece of guidance which helps companies navigate a pretty complex space so that they can use carbon credits as part of their net zero transition, their climate plans.
And substantiate these claims.
And substantiate the claims and be able to say something in public, which if they've done the right thing, they don't have to fear being sued, being called out by NGOs, by questioned by their customers, by their investors.
They're realistic concerns around greenwashing, right? But I don't think that, I think they've been overblown, quite frankly. But what you've now done is codify it. So to give cover to the corporates that have been asking for this cover effectively, say, give us the rules so we can engage in this.
Exactly. And much of the work we've been doing has been with corporates, but also with financial institutions, with NGOs, with governments. We work with 50 governments to try and get something that works for everyone. That's no tall order. That's tall order. But let's go. I mean, let's think. What are we doing? We're saying companies, to be able to do this credibly, they need to first do best practice, good practice on climate change, which means measuring and publishing your greenhouse gas inventory. Pretty basic transparency stuff.
Yep.
Have a target for the long term. Have a series of targets for the short term. Demonstrate that those aren't just some ideas you threw out from the sky, but they are substantiated. You've got a transition plan. You're committing some capex and some opex to this. The guy in charge, his pay is linked to success on those targets.
Exactly.
And so you're embedding it.
Which affect the behavior.
Exactly. So you're embedding this.
That's right.
And then you're saying, if you want to make a claim using carbon credits, you've got to demonstrate you're making real progress towards your targets internally. And then carbon credits go above and beyond that real effort.
Above and beyond. That is so important.
And let's come back to above and beyond in a minute, because it works in different ways.
Okay.
And then, like many of us in this space, we believe that integrity builds trust and trust builds scale. And what underpins integrity is transparency. And we're talking about radical transparency. Right. So let's just remember that this market exists for one purpose, and it's a public purpose to solve the climate change problem. And so my view on transparency is that you should have to put every single bit of information in the public domain unless there is a public purpose not to. Not a commercial confidentiality purpose, not a I don't want to tell you what I'm doing purpose. If there is a good purpose, now it may be that commercial confidentiality does serve the public purpose because you won't be able to monetize your innovation. That's fine, but then tell me that, demonstrate that to me.
Sure.
Don't just say, oh, it's confidential, because anybody can say that. So this is underpinned by disclosure and transparency, and that is what will give us trust. Now, come back to this above and beyond. The VCMI has our carbon integrity claims, which we launched last Monday. We have a full monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework. Companies can now make a claim. And the first companies, we've had an early adopters program, they're going to be making claims in the next few weeks. So that's exciting. But this is, what in the sort of the technical jargon is beyond value chain mitigation. You've demonstrated you're on track to your next target, you're on the way, or you've met your target, and this is above and beyond. So this is, broadly speaking, you do it for reputational purposes, CSR purposes. It's on the whole, available to companies who have nice cash flows, reasonable profitability, see some marketing value. They're going to be consumer-facing brands. What we did also last Monday, which was more controversial, we published the beta version of a Scope 3 flexibility claim. So we've done a whole lot of research over this year and found that most companies are really struggling to meet their Scope 3 targets.
It is almost, I'm not saying this woman, it is infinitely more difficult in Scope 1 and 2, just because of the complexity of the supply chain. I just talked to Sherry from Climate Impact Partners, and she spent her career at GM and then GE, and she said, look, at GM they had, I think she said 10,000 tier 1 suppliers. Can you imagine that? And then their suppliers, all the input costs.
I heard a company this morning,
that one.
an agricultural firm I was talking to this morning, they have 300,000 suppliers. I mean, it's
mind-boggling.
Yeah. So it's important that companies take that into account, because that's how they influence the supply chain.
No doubt. We're not saying don't do that.
But if you're difficult, so let's say you've got your Scope 3 target and you're struggling to meet it, or you fail to meet it. So should the response to that being, naughty boy, stop it? Or should we say, no, bridge the gap with high quality carbon credits, linking it to the ICVCM, CCP units, and that's how you pay for the difference.
And continue decarbonizing.
And continue to decarbonize.
Yeah.
And so one argument for that is, yes, they should fill the gap, because that's what they should be doing anyway.
Yep.
And if companies are able to meet some of their targets using carbon credits, that will encourage more companies to take on targets, because it won't be impossible. There is a reasonable counter argument. I think this is where we need to get away from ideology and dogma. It's either one or the other.
No,
for some companies, it probably makes more sense, or it may make more sense to say, okay, let's not buy the carbon credits. Let's invest in that R&D or that innovation. That means in 2 or 3 years' time, we can really deepen our emission reductions.
That's fine, and that's a normal hierarchy as you go up the marginal abatement cost curve.
Exactly.
There are low-hanging fruit, and we would encourage all companies that are beginning on this journey to exploit those opportunities. But as you go up that MAC curve, it starts to become exponentially more expensive, and now you have this cap and OPEX expenses that are really hard to justify at a board level oftentimes.
Indeed.
And CEOs will ask that question.
So you've got to see what's the ROI on that investment. And for some companies, investing in the carbon credits, give them a bit of breathing space, get some reputational benefit. That's the ROI. For others, it will be investing in the new bit of kit, and that's fine. Not all companies are the same, not all sectors are the same, and not all geographies are the same. So this is where we need to get a little more sophisticated than carbon credits bad, carbon credits good. It's not like that.
It's not absolutely.
And this is, and we need.
It's very like caveman style.
Yeah. Exactly. We need investment in R&D and innovation and technology, and we need investment through carbon markets to those billions of tons of reduction and removal opportunities that are sitting there waiting, but aren't getting the finance. And so, just imagine an example: a rural community in Africa have no electricity. Yeah. And they say, okay, look, we're going to buy some diesel gen sets. And I say, no, get the solar panels instead. And they say, yeah, but the solar panels are more expensive. Okay, wait 5 or 10 years and the government might be able to give us a subsidy to help you do that. You say, wait, no electricity for 5 or 10 years? You're kidding. You're sitting there with your big flat screen TV at home telling me this?
Yes.
You're kidding.
And that's the hypocrisy.
And that's where we need the carbon finance now, so they don't have a diesel gen set spewing out emissions for 10 years, have solar panels. Exactly. But we've got to recognize that if the money is spent there, then it's not spent somewhere else. And that's where we need to be a little bit more sophisticated about our conversations externally, not turn it into good, bad, evil, whatever it happens to be.
No, but that's what we said about the ideology. Yeah. It's silly. We need to move away from that ideology and start focusing on solutions. Right?
Yeah. So the question we collectively need to answer, and this kind of takes me to a bit of what's been happening this week, is how can we incentivize investment in what are called, in carbon credits or other mechanisms like that, in a way that also drives transformation within the companies that are buying. That's the circle we need to square. If we can do that, we've hit the jackpot. We've hit the jackpot. And so this week, you've heard here at COP, we've had whole bunches of announcements and so on and so forth. And from the voluntary carbon market perspective,
we had a VCM day.
We had pretty much, it was called Finance Day, but a lot of it was VCM Day, wasn't it?
We've all coined it VCM Day.
Yeah, so what we had in the morning, we've a lot of the concern from companies and many others has been, So you've got the Science Based Targets Initiative saying one thing, and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol saying another thing, and ICVCM saying another thing, and VCMI saying another thing, and companies are saying,
The heads is on a swivel. They don't even know where to go.
what are we supposed to do? And a natural reaction when you don't know is go, oh, I'll do nothing.
Tools down.
Yeah, I'll wait. And so we had a moment on a couple of days ago, all four of those organizations on stage with Carbon Disclosure Project and We Mean Business mentioned in the video, saying, we are part of an end-to-end framework, an end-to-end, high integrity end-to-end framework, and we will work together over the coming months to answer that question. How do we channel that corporate finance to opportunity, particularly in developing countries, to finance low carbon solutions while not taking the foot off the accelerator to get large corporates around the world to decarbonize as quickly as possible? That's our challenge for the next few months. And if we pull that off, then the leaders in the corporate space will have the comfort to lead even faster. And those who are holding back, laggards, will have nowhere to hide. And that's what we all need. So that was the one thing. And then we've seen a real shift.
I want you to just kind of just let that one go. That's huge, right? First and foremost, you were able to not only coalesce essentially all of these great organizations doing really great work, but oftentimes in pulling in slightly different directions to now effectively align.
Yeah, Rene, you've named that. I think just want to emphasize the point you made. These are four organizations that are doing really good and really important work.
Absolutely.
And I think often people think, oh, these guys are fighting with each other. Let's remember that we agree between us on about 90 to 95%, if not more, of everything.
Yes.
And that's the 5% about, is it better to do it like this or better to do it like that? You know, I compare it to, in 10 years ago or so in the UK where I'm from, all four political parties agreed on, it wasn't called net zero then, but agreed on a long-term goal, decarbonizing the UK economy.
Yeah.
To the point that at the climate negotiations, if the minister from one party had to go to the toilet, say, he would go to his opposition guy, look, you sit in and negotiate for us, no question about it. Now, and so they agreed on the target. What they disagreed was how to get there. One party wanted to tax a bit more, the other wanted to subsidize a bit more. Fine, that's what politics is about.
That's what politics is about.
Now we've got to a point in the UK where we're back to net zero is woke capitalism or woke culture for one party, and the other it's an article of faith. And I say that because people often present SBTI or VCMI as others as disagreeing on the net zero goal. Couldn't be further from the truth. Both of us are doing our utmost to encourage corporates, enable corporates, push corporates to take that action and invest. We just need to work out between us what the common sense, sensible way forward is, where we bridge those two, pull those pieces together, the investment outside value chains and investment inside value chains. And that's what we're focused on working on. So it was a big win.
Big win. And it was literally a paradigm shift that I think that you've unlocked.
Yeah.
And it's what you just described is no different. And I'll kind of try to provide the context, give the most folks. Families, we all disagree, but we're unified in one family.
Exactly.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
And there's so much camaraderie and so much complementarity and there's so much good work that is happening. But just let them resolve it.
Yeah.
This is the natural evolution of discourse. You call it politics, but it's just dialogue. And it's constructive dialogue as opposed to being destructive dialogue. And now, because it's one unified force, you're not now being essentially distributed or disbanded by the folks that want to kind of
that's right.
divide and conquer.
That's right. Your family analogy is a really good one because if you've got siblings, we don't all agree on things, but we all.
If someone punches your brother in the playground, hey, you gotta answer to me.
That's right, and
exactly.
that's the point. We all agree this has to be done with integrity. We all agree it has to be full transparency. We all are committed to we need to reduce emissions by 45 or 50% by 2030. We know we get to net zero, or need to get to net zero. So those big things, there is no disagreement on that.
None whatsoever.
And we all agree that we need to. We're all operating in a voluntary space because of an abject failure of policymakers over the last 35 years. We started climate negotiations in 1988.
Yep.
35. That was before my daughter, who is now a professional lawyer, was born. We were negotiating this stuff. And the fact in 2023 we're still saying, well, voluntary action can fill the gap. Well, we can blame the politicians, but we elect those people.
Yeah.
And so it is we're collectively to blame. The fact that we are, I saw this morning the climate action tracker said current policies are on track for 2.5 degrees rise by the end of the century. I mean, we're way off track.
We're way off track.
We're way off track.
If that's not a halcyon call to galvanize momentum, to actually say, hey, the clock is really ticking.
Yeah.
Get it done. I don't know what.
Well, that's right. And so that we need to be pushing the negotiators here to go as far as they possibly can. And we in the voluntary space need to fill that gap, not as a substitute, but as a way of laying the frame, the foundations for policymakers. So in the carbon market, I don't want to. It's embarrassing. I was one of the co-founders of VeCMI, and there's a video floating around somewhere of the launch in 2007, and I said, in 10 years. This will be obsolete.
Oh, no. I talked to David. He was my first guest on the podcast, and we're working together on a bunch of other stuff, interestingly. But he said the same thing. He's like, no, it just fills the gaps, and we'll be out of a job in 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I said to him after 15 years, like, reflection, like, that's a long way to go. And it's like, it's exhausting. And voluntary markets play a really important role, not only in filling those gaps, fantastic, but it's been a crucible of innovation. Right,
and that's really important. That's one of the things we need here.
Absolutely, these are great stories to tell and to showcase. And the regulators they're not unaware of this.
No.
They're really, and
they really need to pick this up.
Need to pick it up. But I'm seeing already the leaders. You talked about leaders on the corporate enterprise side, but on the public sector side, there are governments that are saying, okay, this is a really amazing toolbox. Let's utilize these tools for enabling effectively our ambition. And now we're looking at it from an economics 101 kind of rational external pricing, externalities, et cetera, all that sort of stuff. But they're saying, hey, what we have to do is provide fungibility of these otherwise voluntary instruments into compliance systems, and voila, now we have carrot and a stick.
Or if they want to, they can take the methodologies, tweak them.
Yes.
What they mustn't do is start from scratch and say, let's ignore that voluntary market.
And let's rebuild
because look at all
over again.
I mean, not even the methodologies. Look at all the digital MRV. Look at all the registries, all the ratings agencies, all of this stuff. We've got all this infrastructure,
exchange infrastructure,
all of which would love to go into a single unified compliance market that can be used for voluntary purposes or compliance purposes.
Why not both?
Yeah, it should be for both.
There is scope for both, and I think actually
is.
from an instrument perspective, now I'm getting into really inside baseball sort of stuff. But this kind of is my pet peeve. Having spent so much time on the exchange side, it is essentially what the commonality here, the lingua franca, effectively, these are credits. So there's a baseline and credit market.
Correct.
Now they choose to go into voluntary buys, or go into Article 6, or they go into COP28, or they go to other compliance markets as Singapore carbon tax. Hey. If the pricing over here is higher, guess what happens? The rational actor on the sell side sells into that higher price point.
Absolutely.
And now you get competition, and that's how you get markets. And it happens in every single other asset class. We're in a petrol state right now in UAE, doing amazing things right now on a policy basis. But they're still highly dependent on the fossil fuels. But effectively, we're seeing this kind of transition underway, right?
Yeah. No, so I think that this is where I think all of us believe. And that I would include, I can't speak for the others, but I would imagine SBTI and CDP, and we are all saying, come on, regulators, regulate us out of business. Mm-hmm. There's going to be no shortage of work for us to do.
No, there's a lot of work.
But everybody, corporates who made 10 or 15 years ago saying, no more regulation, we don't want climate policy, they're all saying,
they're all clamoring for regulation because they just want the rules.
Just give us the rules.
Yes.
We know we've got to do this. There's no way out. We want the rules. That gives us certainty. Then we invest. Then we innovate.
But you know why? It's because of the uncertainty principle. So it's just a risk. And companies have reputational risk. They have fiduciary risk. They have all sorts of different risks they need to adjust for. And if it's risky, then the idea, like you said, it's tools down type scenario. Providing them with this codification, these rule sets, and having regulators come in, it means that they're not going to get picked apart. I give the analogy of the wildebeest crossing in Africa, and essentially they're trying to cross, and there's a few crocodiles in there. It's the first ones that are, this trepidation. But once they go, right? And that's what happens.
Exactly, and that's what we need. Yeah.
And we see those outliers, right? You said the coalition of the enterprises that are really the leaders. They're standing up for this market, and I commend them for their action. They're fantastic. And we should see more of them, but it'll be, one or two from different sectors, automotive, aviation, shipping, whatever. And then it starts like this bubble distribution. They just going, and then they get snowball.
The other thing that's been really interesting this week, apart from the corporate side and the sort of regulatory piece, is the number of countries, developing countries, who have kind of been perhaps more timid in the past have now said, we will see the voluntary carbon markets will help us meet our NDCs more quickly, and will also enable us to set more ambitious targets in the future. They're not seeing it as a way of getting out of jail. They want the transformation. They all recognize that, while it's the responsibility of our countries, the countries that have been polluting out of the atmosphere for years, to lead and thank you.
I think they're applauding you. Fantastic.
So, we all recognize that, it's the big polluters. It's the US, it's the EU, it's China, it's Russia. We've got to lead. Developing countries want
Australia. Let's start with Australia.
And Australia.
As a proud Australian, let's start Australia.
Yeah, Australia very much so too. I feel comfortable because your per capita emissions are about twice mine. So
energy exporting.
Yeah. But developing countries are now saying, and we've heard the same from the World Bank, from the International Monetary Fund this week, that carbon finance, including voluntary carbon finance, is not a nice to have. It's a must have if we want to drive change. If we want to not have stranded opportunities to reduce and remove emissions. And that's really important, that stranded opportunities side, is because these opportunities to save the forest, in the same example I gave you about electrification earlier, we can't just say to the forest, please don't be deforested for 10 years while we get our acts together. We need to pay for that now. We need to pay for the people who are going to look after the forest, who are going to manage it, who are going to monitor it. People who look from the forest.
It provides so much in services.
Exactly.
From a biodiversity perspective as well. Once the biodiversity collapses, it's game over.
It's game over. It's absolutely game over. And we just heard this morning about the big tipping points. We're getting close to the tipping points with boreal forests, with ice sheets.
There's 6 out of the 9 global tipping points, but like your signal, because we're overstepping.
We're overstepping way over. So we can't say we'll wait for 5 or 10 years.
No, there's no time.
We need to do it now. Developing countries that are hosting projects recognize it. And the ones who really thought this through are buying into the integrity message, because they're saying integrity, and it's interesting because they take it and they adapt it and they say, look, integrity, often we as countries are being questioned. We're considered a political risk, and we're saying, hang on, if that's the case, you're a buyer, you're a risk as well. How do we know you're not just greenwashing? And that's why we want the integrity rules.
Integrity is great. I love the fact that it's moved away from quality, can I just say, to integrity.
And it works both ways.
No, absolutely.
High integrity sellers, high integrity buyers.
Yes.
And it works both ways. That old, let's call it what it is, a kind of neo-colonialist mentality. Oh, well, African governments, you can't trust them. That's bullshit. Have you been to my country?
Yeah.
Trust my government?
Yeah.
So we need to get away from that. And so we've had the big development institutions, host countries, all saying carbon finance, including now voluntary carbon finance, while the other people get their acts together, is essential. So this has been really interesting this week. Something which was
I feel really buoyed by the energy of this. Positivity.
Something that was a niche thing. A few corporates wanting to make spurious carbon neutrality claims is now being recognized as a serious source of sustainable development finance, a serious way to get companies to raise their ambition and go further forward. I mean, that's what we want. Now, we still need to generate demand. And this goes back to this question of how and when companies can use carbon credits.
The rules. You just set the rules. Yeah. The game will begin.
But companies need to have an incentive.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned Singapore. You've got a tax, and you can use carbon credits for up to 5% of that. Clear incentive for Singaporean companies to go, okay, up to this point I pay the tax. Here's where I buy carbon credits.
And as long as the offset is slightly a discount to the tax,
then you go for that.
And I actually wouldn't be surprised if some actors actually purchase the 5% at higher quality and even more expensive credits, just to say, hey, here's what we do. Over time, as the price continues to step up, obviously it reverts back to that floor level. But it's great to see that.
And you've got the same thing in Colombia. Then you've got some internal markets like in as with Colombia and Malaysia, looking at this, other countries. So they've got an incentive for corporates.
Yeah.
So we need that's what's lacking at the moment, is the incentive that says to companies why you should and why you must do that. So it could be a tax which you can use carbon credits to offset, or it could be carbon credits under some kind of cap and trade system, or it could just be an obligation, whether that's legal or a norm, that every company every year will buy carbon credits to cover X% of its footprint, as well as its science-based target stuff. You must. This is either corporate good practice, but we need to have those incentives so companies can't say that we'd love to do this, but.
But yeah, no, completely. And I'll even raise you one more. We should start seeing more sectors doing this as well. I've been a big proponent in the aviation industry, helping to build capacity in that sector with IATA, with IATA for now close to a decade, and have had the pleasure of working with so many of these clients. But this is a really hard to abate sector, but they recognize the importance of offsets as one of the core pillars. It's technological, operational efficiency, sustainable aviation fuels, and offset. It's the backstop. You need to have the goalie on the pitch, and that's what it is. And it provides them for that solution. I want to see more industry sectors that are hard to abate: cement, steel, shipping, you name it, to start also recognizing the opportunity at play here. It's not a get out of jail free card. It is a tool that allows them to balance and about to hedge their risk.
And it's interesting this year, they're correlations, they're not causations, but we've seen 3 reports this year which have shown that companies that are using carbon credits are amongst the leaders in decarbonisation, they're leaders in setting targets, they're leaders in innovation. There are multiple reasons why that might be the case.
It's logic, and it's called drag coefficient. In fact, if you're doing this, you're setting internal price point as on your internal balance sheet for the purchase of offsets. Now, as a line item, as any sort of financial person knows, is what does this cost here? Oh, can we do it more cheaply internally?
Exactly.
And it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Conversely, I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier off camera, but effectively, as you go up that marginal negative cost curve, right, it becomes harder and harder. And so we need a higher carbon price over time. So you might also have different companies at different times points in that spectrum. It is a tool. Utilize it for your benefit. You don't build a house without a hammer, without a drill, without all the tools.
So that's what we need. So we need the incentives for companies to do it, and we need to think what's worked in the past. How do we channel that? It could be an obligation, it could be a norm, but it's got to be something when the CSO can go to the CFO and say, we either have to invest this or it is seriously advantageous for us to invest this. At the moment, it's a kind of, I'd like to invest in it, but I might be called out in the press. I might be sued. There's no real ROI except in a few cases.
And it's perverse.
So we've got to this really, and I'd like to swear, but really strange situation where we know at the level of the world, the cost of action is far outweighed by the cost of inaction. But for many corporates at the moment, the cost of action outweighs the cost of inaction.
We need to invert that.
They do. They're taking action.
Logical.
The companies that are doing something are getting called out. They're getting abused. They may get it wrong, but if they get it wrong, they're being criticized for doing it at all.
Yes.
I'd much rather someone tried, gets it wrong, and hands up. Okay, it didn't work. I'll try again.
I see tools already evolving in this space, and I know we need to wrap very soon. But effectively, like BeZero just put out an opinion, consultation piece right now is the word I was looking for. But effectively, to look at a portfolio and risk-adjusted basis for offsets. And so why can't companies purchase not just necessarily the 100% in retrospect, but effectively have an additional buffer, right, of credits that either they can draw down on after the fact if there's some sort of question with regards to, because all credits are issued at 1 ton, but then when the claim is substantiated, maybe there's a risk adjustment, maybe it's 0.9 of a ton, or maybe it's 1.2 of a ton. But on a portfolio aggregated basis, you can ameliorate from those issues.
And that's exactly what needs to happen.
And if you had a reversal event, a fire, or some other sort of event, you draw down from your buffer pool. That's what it's for.
It's if you find out,
you carry it forward.
You find out because technology's improved that maybe you measured the baseline wrongly in the first place. Not because it was not because it was bad faith.
Yes,
but we just know more now. Also, when you did it, take a forestry project, you did a baseline for that project area. Now you can monitor the whole of the biome of the ecosystem. And you recognize, okay, we have accredited by 10%.
But we give free passes like that exactly to technology, right? If I look at my old first iPhone, the iPhone 3 or whatever it was, and compare it to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it's night and day. It's like a spaceship.
Whereas if they sold you an iPhone 3 now, you go, I don't want this piece of crap.
Yeah, exactly. It's just slow. It doesn't work. Exactly. So, but you bought it at the time because it was the state of the art, and that's the thing.
And that's not to say it's always been technical. There's undoubtedly been bad faith actors. There are in every single market, especially in the early stages.
But the standards have actually a really good job, I have to say, to actually stamp them out, and they continue to evolve the methodologies. I know, you know full well that the standards actually rate on this scale. They continue to push it forward. They continue to cull these methodologies with its concerns. They make adjustments. They have different versions of the standards. They evolve.
We're seeing that now. New methodologies, old methodologies being retired, old MRV tools being retired, and new ones coming in place.
But another perversity is that the media that has this kind of accident right, they don't talk about those things. They don't talk about the good news stories because their old adage is, if it bleeds, it leads. And they focus on the negative only. And that's why we need to take back that narrative and celebrate action like what you have taken. And it shows audacity, but it's really great that you've effectively, like I said, coalesced these amazing groups. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say I'm pretty pleased with it. But we've still got a lot of work to do, and we can get there. We can get there, and there's a sense of optimism. So firstly, thank you for your tireless work to you and your team of 9. I just learned that you have 9 people, and now maybe a 10. And that's incredible, the amount of leverage that you guys have, what you've delivered so far. I wish you continued success and just continue, please, moving forward. Brilliant.
We desperately need this as an industry, and we continue to do the hard work.
Great, and thank you. Thank you very much, Rene. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
As always.
Thank you very much.
And I hope I'm back sometime.
Let's do it properly over a cocktail in a normal setting without people cheering and yelling in the background. So thanks very much.
But we're going to take the Czar cheers, aren't we?
Yeah.
All right. Take care, mate.
Thank you.